The mission is simple: to help high achievers naturally eliminate emotional and physical obstacles so they can optimize their life for higher achievement. Welcome. You have just entered the Genesis Zone. Good day, and welcome to the Genesis Zone Show. This is Dr. Brian Brown. Thank you for taking time out of your busy Thursday to join us. There are three things that I learned at one of the most progressive and cutting-edge wellness conferences last week, and I'm going to share those with you today. And these three things will radically improve your brain health and your body health. So stay tuned as we dive into this. Last week, I had the distinct privilege of sharing the stage with the likes of Dr. Joe Dispenza, Marie Forleo, Joe Polish, Dr. Paul Baratiero. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, and Dr. Ken Schwartz. And that's only naming a few of the rock stars I had the privilege of meeting and teaching with last week. There were so many things that I learned from this amazing group of humans. It's really kind of hard to decide where to start and what to share. So I decided that the three things that I'm going to share were three of the most mind-blowing things that I was exposed to this past week. So I'm starting with my three big takeaways, but I promise this: I'm going back to doing interviews here at the Genesis Zone Show. And between now and the end of the year, I'm going to be very busy conducting and pre-recording a lot of interviews with the amazing people that I met last week. And in 2023, in January of 2023, when we launch season 3, I'll be releasing those pre-recorded interviews throughout the year. The information and guests that are coming up in season 3 and that we've got lined up, you're not going to want to miss. So stay tuned. The show just keeps getting better and better and better, understanding who we are, what our voice is, what our message is, and you're not going to want to miss season 3. As I've got these guests lined up to come in, these amazing people that I met last week. Now on to today's topic. I'm going to be sharing with you, as I said, three of the biggest takeaways from three people that I've come to respect. One that I've known of for a while. Two, I never even met until last week. But all three of them are doing some cutting edge work in the world. So these three people are Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Paul Baratiero, and Dr. Ken Schwartz. Now, these three gentlemen are impacting the world's health and wellness in ways that, I got to be honest with you, I never thought it was possible or imaginable. So first up is Dr. Paul Baratiero. He's a naturopathic doctor by training and has lectured across the world over the last 22 years. Now, 12 years ago, he set out to educate the world on the vast benefits of molecular hydrogen. More on that in a minute. Don't get blurry-eyed and foggy-headed over that term. I know it sounds kind of technical, but I'm going to break it down for you, as I always do here at the Genesis Zone Show. Now, his message has focused on the critical role of molecular hydrogen, or H2, to reduce oxidative stress and inflammation. Now, as you may recall, if you've been listening to us for a while, many times we've discussed here at the Genesis Zone Show how inflammation is the root of all disease and illness. And if we can control inflammation, then we can control the narrative when it comes to disease and illness. I've always felt like if we understand a person's underlying genetics and we're able to modify those genes in a positive way to create a more positive environment in relationship to how people respond to the stressors around them and within them, then we can start winning the game and overcome and actually fully win the entire shebang when it comes to inflammation. Now, what I've never explained is why managing inflammation is important, and some of the techniques that we used when we're modifying genes is to use some very potent antioxidants and why that's important. So I'm going to explain that to you today. I'm going to break that down because it's critically important to understand this in order to understand molecular hydrogen and Dr. Paul's teaching around molecular hydrogen and why this is important. So when your energy factories within your cells, also known as mitochondria, are working overtime due to illness or injury, stress, or chronic disease, oxidative stress occurs. Now, what do we mean by oxidative stress? It's kind of another technical term. Well, we've heard of antioxidants, right? Well, we need antioxidants to take care of oxidative stress chemicals, okay? We know that antioxidants like, say, vitamin C are able to help reduce oxidative stress load in the body. And that's a good thing. But do you know why? Well, that's what I'm going to talk to you about. How this happens is that antioxidants like vitamin C, they literally donate a hydrogen ion to an oxidative stress causing chemical structure called a hydroxyl group. Now, don't worry about what that's called. Just think of the hydroxyl group kind of like a bull in a china cabinet. It's very destructive. It breaks everything it comes in contact with, and it just can't help itself. It's just one of those things, literally like a bull in a china cabinet. Therefore, we end up with illness and disease when the bulls are left unchecked to roam around the china cabinet because they just break everything. They break our inflammatory response systems. They break our detoxification pathways. They break down our immune responses. They just go wild. But don't worry about all the technical stuff for now. Just know that when something like vitamin C is introduced into the body, it donates that hydrogen ion to the hydroxyl group and basically turns the raging bull into a pussycat. Basically, it turns it into a water molecule of all things. And nobody's going to argue that our body needs a lot of water in order to survive. So years ago, it was discovered that drinking water made with an extra hydrogen ion attached to it, AKA hydrogen water, when you drink this hydrogen water, you're better able to get the much needed extra hydrogen into the body to tame the raging bull, or in other words, to make the hydroxyl group turn into water, okay, and turn it into the pussycat. So Dr. Paul Baratiero and his team created and patented the most efficient way to make hydrogen water. Now, a lot of companies out there, scientists out there, they can make hydrogen water. They just don't get enough of it into the water to actually make a really good health difference. But Dr. Paul and his team, they kind of figured all that out. And now based on the current research for hydrogen water consumption, we're beginning to understand that and see that the symptoms associated with depression and anxiety and attention deficit disorder and diabetes and gut health disorders and autoimmune diseases, those things just begin to clear up when a person starts consuming hydrogen water on a consistent basis. Well, why is that? Well, let's think back. If inflammation is the root of all disease and we need that extra hydrogen molecule or ion in order to get rid of inflammation, by drinking hydrogen water, we're decreasing inflammation in our body at the cellular level, which is hugely important. So who would have guessed that, drinking water, and you've heard me preach about the benefits of drinking water forever if you've been hanging around here very long, but specifically hydrogen-rich water could enhance your health, but it does. So if you want to know more about how to source getting hydrogen water for yourself that has the highest levels of hydrogen in it that you can feasibly get, I want you to write in chat water and I'll message you with more information. All right. P.S. Dr. Paul is actually going to be one of our guests in season 3 in the new year in 2023. You're not going to want to miss his interview. I've already got it on the calendar. He and I talked at the conference, and we've already set that up. And I'm going to be interviewing him first week in November. But again, it'll be for a pre-recorded interview that'll be coming out in season 3 at the beginning of the year. Next up is Dr. Ken Schwartz, an amazing guy. Dr. Ken Schwartz is a biochemist by training, and he's run numerous biochemical labs across the planet. During his work at one particular lab, it was called the MOXIE fusion reactor, he discovered carbon-60. Now, and when we're talking about Dr. Paul, we're talking about hydrogen ions, hydrogen molecules. Now we're talking about carbon molecules, a carbon ion called carbon-60. Okay. Carbon-60 is hard to come by, but they've figured out there's a way to manufacture it. It's a cumbersome process. Anyway, he discovered when he was working on the MOXIE fusion reactor project, he discovered carbon-60. In fact, the company that he was working for at the time made all of the researchers on that project take carbon-60 on a regular basis to protect them against the effects of radiation. Now, he was curious about this, so he kind of started digging in and looking at the literature, and there wasn't that much at that time. It was discovered in 1985, and researchers on the carbon-60 discovery won the Nobel Prize in chemistry in 1996. So it was slow on the uptake in the science community as being recognized as important for anything. But in 1996, these guys won the Nobel Prize, and one of their pieces of work that helped win them the Nobel Prize was their work for protection against radiation exposure. Now, that study that was conducted during that time was a rat study. It was an animal study. And what they did is they divided the mice, the rats, into 2 different groups. One half of the mice were given carbon-60. The other half of the mice were given placebo. Now, the researchers didn't know which group got what. This group had little red dots on their back, and this little group over here had black dots on their back that they painted on their back just so they could differentiate the groups and who got what. And then they exposed the entire group all at the same time to a lethal dose of radiation. And what happened is the group of mice that received the placebo or the sugar pill, they died within 10 minutes. Well, the group that received the carbon-60, at 1 hour, they were still alive. At 4 hours, they were still alive. At 16 hours, they were still alive. At 24 hours, they were still alive. And by that time, the researchers, the observers were so tired. They were like, we're going to call the study at 24 hours and just say they were still alive at 24 hours. They came back in the next morning. The mice were still alive. Those mice ended up dying of natural causes and lived out a full life with the physiology of their body did not change one bit in response to exposure to that lethal dose of radiation. So this is what helped them win the Nobel Prize, obviously, because it's probably very, very important. Now, the mechanism of action has continued to be understood better and better and better as time has passed. So what is carbon-60? What does it do? Well, if you remember from the first segment that I just did on Dr. Paul and hydrogen water, come to find out, carbon-60 is a radical hydrogen scavenger. So it will go throughout the body and it will gather up hydrogen. It has a very high magnetic attraction to hydrogen. It gathers up hydrogen, carries it into the mitochondria, which is, remember, the little energy factories inside your cell. It delivers the hydrogen to those hydroxyl groups so that they turn back into water. So here's the curious thing. Talk about being in the right place at the right time. At this particular conference, Dr. Paul and Dr. Ken had never been at the same venue together with their booths set up out in the exhibit hall, but they happen to be right by each other. And so they got to comparing notes and realized that, okay, you create more hydrogen and put it in water, and we have carbon 60 and it's a hydrogen scavenger. What happens if we combine these? So they're actually going to be doing some research together to determine what the effects of that are. Now, I'm going to tell you an anecdotal story. On day one, I began taking carbon 60. I met them first. I started taking their product immediately. And I noticed that my energy level was up, my focus and concentration was up, my mood was better, mental clarity was just on point. And normally in crowded situations like that, I have a tendency to get distracted in conversations. I mean, I didn't have that distraction at all. So later that afternoon, I discovered the hydrogen water people, Dr. Paul's people, and they had a hydrogen water generator set up there, and they were giving out free hydrogen water, and said, if you want to refill your water bottle, come by our booth anytime. You can refill your water bottle. So I started drinking hydrogen water at the end of that first day. And I noticed that my energy level went up even more and my concentration got even better. The next morning, I drank the hydrogen water, took the carbon 60, and within 30 minutes, I noticed that my core temperature was up. My metabolism was up. I checked my heart rate. My heart rate was fine. So I circled back around to their booths and talked to Dr. Paul and Dr. Ken. I said, is it possible that this is revving up my metabolism? And they just both laughed because they're like, of course it is, because it increases energy production ultimately, because it gives the mitochondria what they need, which is that extra hydrogen to get rid of that hydroxyl group and convert it back into something that's usable and can be turned back into energy. So I had an epiphany. I had an aha moment at that point. And they had obviously already put that two and two together of working together. But just anecdotally, what an amazing combination. Now, the research on carbon 60 since then, and what they're finding is, for example, again, this is a one-off case study, but Dr. Ken told me about a person that they had treated with carbon 60 who had glaucoma, and their vision wasn't completely lost, but they had about a 60% reduction in vision. And what they saw over a 7-month period is that patient's vision returned to normal. That's hard to believe when you try to wrap your mind around that level of improvement in a disease process. But again, if we take care of inflammation, we take care of the chronic process that's going on with the disease, right? Okay, so we know that. They've since done high blood pressure studies. They've done cardiovascular disease studies. They've done Parkinson's studies and Alzheimer's studies. And I think I said type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes. They've done studies in all of these areas, and they see improvement every single time. They've done research with depression and anxiety, ADHD, and autistic spectrum disorder, and they see improvement every single time. So taking care of inflammation is key. And these are the hallmark. This is a hallmark takeaway I want you to know from both of these first two vignettes that I just gave you, and these two people that I met, these two researchers, and what they're doing independently, which is also working interdependently with one another on simply taking care of inflammation by raising hydrogen levels, healthy hydrogen levels in the body. And most people walk around, number one, dehydrated, and number two, we don't get enough hydrogen in our body. So those are the two takeaways. If you want to know more about carbon 60 and how to get a more carbon 60 in your body, message me below. Just like I said above with the hydrogen water, just message me about water. But on carbon 60, if you want to know specifically about that, put carbon, CARBON, carbon in the comments below, and I'll be glad to get you more information. I'll message it to you. Right now, I don't want to put that in public comments just because of Facebook rules and regulations. So I will message that to you in Messenger privately. And if you want to know about both, put carbon and water. I'll be glad to message you about both. Last up, and dare I say, save the best for last? Maybe so. I've followed this guy for years, and I've never had the privilege of hearing him speak in person. His conferences are 7-day conferences. That's all he does. He doesn't do anything else. There's no other way you can work with him. It's just a 7-day retreat, basically. And they sell out in under 5 minutes every single time. So I listen to him on YouTube. I listen to him on Spotify, but I've never seen him in person. And so the privilege of not only getting to share the stage with this man, but to be able to hear him in person for a total of about 4 hours worth of lecture was just life-changing, professionally and personally. Dr. Joe Dispenza is one of those guys that if you don't know about him, you need to get to know him better. He is doing probably some of the most cutting edge neuroscience research on the planet, hands down. He is first and foremost a neuroscientist and researcher, but he was trained originally as a chiropractor. He's written numerous books and is also an international lecturer and educator, teaching people how to improve their physical and mental potential through rewiring their brains to work at maximum capacity. I can't say enough good about him. I'm going to go a little bit into his story. And there was a point in time where he was injured. He was told that you've got to have these surgeries or you're not going to have any quality of life. He took a stand and he said, no, I'm not going to do that. And he set out on a mission to find a way to heal himself naturally. The power of meditation. And if you've been hanging around here very long, you've heard me mention it several times, the studies on the power of meditation and mindfulness practices when it comes to literally reprogramming your inflammatory genes. And again, there's that word again, inflammation. What happens when we take care of inflammation? We reduce or eliminate disease altogether. So he found a way to heal himself. Now, early on, he was teaching anybody that would listen, and his professional peers and the research community, they didn't take him seriously. They called him a quack. They said what he was doing was pseudoscience, and he stayed the course because he knew it worked. And he kept teaching and kept teaching and kept teaching. And then he conducted his first 7-day retreat because he was like, well, what would happen if we take people who don't know how to meditate and over a 7-day period, we actually teach them how to meditate? What would happen? And in that first retreat, some people healed cancer and Parkinson's and MS. And he didn't believe it. He will tell you, even to this day, things happen in his retreats where people are able to use the power of the mind to heal their body. And he doesn't even understand it. In fact, there was one recently, just last month, he said, where a lady came, she had thyroid cancer. She had her thyroid completely removed. So there were scans done with pre-surgery to prove that the thyroid was there. There was cancer there. And then there were scans after surgery to prove that no thyroid there, all cancer removed. And so she comes to the 7-day retreat. And over the course of the 7 days, and this is hard to believe, I know it sounds wackadoo, her thyroid regrew. And he even told his team when they came to him with this information, he said, there's no way that happened. I don't believe it. If she's able, I want us to fly her to San Diego where our lab is. And I want us to do a PET scan on her and prove that thyroid grew back. Sure enough, they were able to get the scan repeated and her thyroid regrew. And that sounds sensational. I know it does. It sounds sensational to me. It sounded sensational to him. But he went on to lecture and tell us about why he believes this is occurring. What they've seen in brainwave studies, while people are hooked up to EEG machines, they're currently in an active PET scan environment. So you're seeing real time changes in the chemical signatures in the brain. What they've learned is that when uh, a person is in a beta wave state, and you're in a beta wave state right now, just listening to this podcast, listening to this show, and processing the information that I've given you. Now, if I were to tell you that, oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you there's a pop quiz, you're going to be tested on this, your anxiety goes up a little bit and you go into a mid-level beta wave state, okay, brain wave state, beta wave brain state. It's mid-level and it just, your anxiety's gone up a little bit. But he said what they found is that when people are struggling with cancer or MS or anything else that's going on, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, vascular dementia, cardiovascular disease, you name it. What he finds is that they operate in a very high beta brainwave state at all times. They're just kind of stuck in overdrive. He described it as kind of like having one foot on the gas pedal and one foot on the brakes at all time. And he said that's never a good thing to live in that kind of state. But it's where people live who are in a chronic state of inflammation and disease. He went on to say that they've done further research to measure the actual some 3,000 plus chemicals in the body that occur in response to stress and disease, and they're all elevated in these people. And then they come back and they use this same group of people and say, okay, can we teach them to meditate and lower them out of a beta wave state? To make a long story short, they move them from beta to alpha, which is a more relaxed state. Kind of like maybe when you're in your living room in the evening and you're reading a book and the lights are dimmed down low, you move into that calm alpha wave state. Mothers, right after they deliver a baby, and they're holding that baby in their arms for the first time, they're in that alpha brainwave state at that point. Okay. So that gives you an idea what alpha brainwave state is. And then as they meditate more, they move from there into a theta brainwave state. And the theta brainwave state is the state that your brain is in when it's literally asleep. So all the lights are out, everybody's checked out, nobody's at home, and your brain is completely asleep. And what they see is through each of these phases, alpha and then moving into theta, that the stress hormones and these chemicals start coming down. But he said the miracle occurs when a person moves from theta brainwave states to gamma brainwave states. He says it's very difficult to achieve that outside of meditation. But even novice, beginner meditators can be taught over a 7-day period how to move into that gamma brainwave state. He said they've literally drawn blood from people who are meditating and consistently are in a high state of coherence. That's where you're in that gamma brainwave state. And it literally changes the physiology of your heart and your autonomic nervous system. All the things that are on autopilot calm down. And all of those chemicals, those 3,000 plus chemicals, come down to below normal levels. And when he qualified that, what does below normal levels look like? Well, in research terms, it's normal to see 1 or 2 standard deviations below normal. However, what they saw was not 100 standard deviations below normal or 200 or 400, but 800 times below normal. He said, he followed that statement up and he said, that's a whole lot of love. He said, because when you're in that level of coherence where you're 800 degrees of standard deviation below normal on the stress scale and your chemical stress scales within your body. He said the heart is energetically in a place to where it actually creates healing. It sends out healing. And they've actually studied this with advanced meditators who can achieve a high state of coherence and move into that gamma brainwave state very quickly. They've actually put a person who doesn't meditate, doesn't have any interest in meditating, onto a table lying face up. And the person who's the gamma wave person just simply puts their hands around on either side of their head, not touching their head, just on either side of their head, and goes into their meditation and puts himself into a gamma wave state. And the person that's laying on the table, he said they're running about a 60% track record where 60% of the time that person receives a healing just from the energetic transfer that occurs from the person who is the experienced meditator. They took it one step further and decided, wait a minute, is that person who's the experienced meditator, does their blood look even more different? So they were able to take the blood samples from these people, salivary samples, urine samples, poop samples, you name it. Anyway, they took the blood and they dropped blood on all different types of cancer cells. And what they saw was it just didn't kill the cancer. It totally obliterated it. It turned into nothingness. There was nothing there. Now that was in a test tube, obviously. And obviously there's a whole lot of ethics around putting your blood into somebody else. However, what he's trying to say is there are literal physiological changes in the body that occur that are positive and bring about and promote healing, not only within you, but in the person that's in your vicinity. So an amazing lecture, an amazing 4 hours that he was able to pour into us. And one thing I want to leave you with that he said is that this all boils down to the epigenome. He said what they're seeing is a modification, a positive modification of the epigenome on a scale that is unprecedented simply through mindfulness and meditation. So to finally be able to hear in person from the guy that's actually doing the research on mindfulness and meditation and genetic changes was an opportunity of a lifetime. I want to leave you with this. This is a quote from Dr. Dispenza that I wrote down very quickly because I think it's very important. He said, the person who's living in lack is waiting for their wealth to feel abundant. The person who's living in lack is waiting for their success to feel empowered. The person who's living in lack is waiting for their healing to feel gratitude. The person who's living in lack is waiting for their new relationship to feel love. And the person who's living in lack is waiting for their mystical experience to feel awe. And he goes on to explain, and I quote, this is the Newtonian model, Newton, apple falling on the head, Sir Isaac Newton. This is the Newtonian model of reality, of cause and effect, waiting for an event to happen to take away the feeling of separation or lack. But we've discovered the moment you feel gratitude, your healing begins. The moment you feel worthy and abundant, you're generating wealth. And the moment you're empowered is the moment you are moving towards success. And the moment you are in awe of life, in awe of the life you're going to have, a mystical experience occurs. This is our cause and effect. So that's all I got for today. I don't even feel like I need to say anything. Tune in next Thursday at noon Eastern Standard Time for our next In the Zone segment, where I'll be sharing the latest research and my insights about that research as it relates to optimizing your genes, your physical and emotional health, your brain health. And as always, most informed, most trusted, and most grateful you spent this time with us today. Until next time, stay in the zone. I'm Dr. Brian Brown.